So today we're going to look at MLS attendance, and specifically we're going to compare the current attendance in MLS compared to 2019. And the reason why I'm comparing this season attendance compared to 2019 is 2019 was really the last year before the you-know-what pandemic happened, and it really hits the world of MLS and pretty much hits the world in general. And that this season is really the first season where we actually have the new normal, and that no team, of course, have capacity restrictions since 2019. Since we know what happened in 2021, where pretty much in the beginning of the season, almost every single team have capacity restriction, and then in 2020, at the peak of the COVID pandemic, there were a lot of teams that didn't even have fans in the stands for pretty much every single game in that shortened COVID season in MLS. So I'm of course going to look at 24 of the 28 teams, and the reason why I left out 4 teams and I left out Nashville, Inter Miami, Austin, and Charlotte is because they weren't in the league back in 2019, and I can't really kind of compare to them before pre-pandemic season because they weren't in the league, and it's kind of hard to do so. So instead, I'll take a look at those 24 teams that was in the league back in 2019 and look at how they're doing right now in terms of the attendance. And just to kind of just do a quick summary of that, there's no doubt the attendance have went down, and there's a lot of factors in terms of it. In fact, I can pretty much make a single video talk about why the attendance, of course, have gone down in MLS, but I'll kind of talk about exactly why once we look at every of these 24 teams in terms of the capacity or the attendance that they had in 2019, and that's average attendance, to the ones in 2022. And it's also important to note that every time when I mention attendance, I want to specifically say that these attendance are actually pay attendance. They're not actually attendance in terms of how many butts was in the seat, and that's also been a big debate, and not just in MLS but in sports in general, of the fact that should we count butts in the seats or should we just actually count pay attendance and so forth? Because when I watch a lot of MLS games this season, there's no doubt that I have seen a lot of games that there's been a lot of empty seats compared to what we saw in the 2019 season. But with that being said, let us actually begin with Atlanta United, and I'm actually going to go from the team that leads the attendance in 2019 to the team that of course have the lowest attendance. And Atlanta United, of course, were leading the attendance with 52,510 as their average attendance. In 2022, that number has dropped down to 48,454, but it still leads the league in terms of the attendance, and the differential is 4,056 fans less in terms of the attendance compared to 2019. Now, keep in mind, I think Atlanta still have a couple of games where they are going to play in full capacity at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and when I mean full capacity, I mean they pretty much open up all 3 tier of the stadium, and there's times where Atlanta, of course, could be averaging like 65 or even 70,000 fans in the stands. But yeah, there's no doubt this season, even when they do open up full bowl, it's not at a 70,000 level. There's been times where they hit 60,000 plus. But another thing that is very worthy to note is that there's been a lot of empty seats at Atlanta United game. I mean, I've seen it on TV too. There's a lot of red seats inside the stadium, and I think it kind of makes sense, and also kind of just kind of mention of the typical talk whenever we talk about attendance, of the fact that obviously the reason why maybe there's teams that might have a lot of empty seats in the stands is because they're not doing well. If your team is doing well, people are going to show up. If you're not doing well, then yeah, of course people aren't showing up, and it's no surprise that Atlanta, knowing the fact that they have struggled this season compared to 2019, where that was still the season where it was kind of almost near the end of Atlanta United dominant when they came into MLS, and that was the year when they reached the Eastern Conference Final and still play some good soccer, even though it was not as entertaining during that year when they were under Frank de Boer compared to Tata Martino. People were still showing up because of the hype, and not to mention that was also the year they came off of an MLS Cup, so they were the defending MLS Cup champion. And knowing in 2022, when the fact that the team has still not came anywhere close to getting to the highs that they had when they came into the league, is no surprise the attendance have dropped, and the attention span maybe has lessened, but still they still draw in some of the biggest crowd in MLS and has really kind of helped in terms of the total average in terms of the league because of drawing so many big numbers. Now, we then look at the Seattle Sounders, who they were averaging 40,247 fans, but in 2022, it's now gone down to 33,675, and the differential is minus 6,572. And this, might be a bit of a surprise considering the fact that they are actually the team. If I look at every single team in terms of differential, they have the largest amount. But again, there's a lot of factors in terms of why the Sounders have their numbers drop. Of course, as I will talk about at the end of the video, of how there's still certain people that don't want to be at large event because there's still a pandemic that is going on, and not to mention we also have the inflation rate, and also tickets to Sounder games are not cheap whatsoever. I mean, I went to their opener or their season opener against Nashville SC, and I paid almost $100 to go watch them play, and that in an inflation time like that, people probably are not going to show in like $100 to, of course, watch an MLS game, especially that's just for one person. If you go with a family, that could be like $400 that you're spending. And not to mention the Sounders, like I said, with Atlanta United, they're definitely having a down year the season. Though again, I will say that the argument is the fact that they did win CL, and that you would think that drawing, even with the down year that they had in the league, they of course won a trophy. Maybe more Sounders fans, of course, would go to games, but that doesn't seem like it is kind of the case, and that they of course have definitely not got to the hype that they were just a couple of years ago, when they were also a team that before Atlanta came into the league, they were leading the league in terms of attendance every single week. Then we get to FC Cincinnati, who have a 27,337 average attendance, and compared to in 2022, their attendance is at 22,169, which have a minus 5,167 difference. Now, I do put a big asterisk in terms of FC Cincinnati, and I will put some asterisks in terms of some of these teams because Cincinnati have moved into their new stadium in 2021. They, of course, moved into TKL Stadium, and TKL Stadium is much more smaller than the one that is at Napier Stadium. And not to mention, the 27,336, the average is due not just because they're playing a bigger stadium, but it was also the hype. Like, they sold out their first ever game in MLS with like 30,000 plus or so, and even when they weren't doing very well and turns out to be a wooden spoon kind of team, people are still showing up because of the hype that is around with Cincinnati finally making it to MLS. And again, when you look at the current attendance that they have, it's still pretty good. I mean, 22,169. I think that's also so pretty much on par of last year in terms of their attendance, and you can't argue the fact that Cincinnati fans, they have been very, very loyal to their team even through the tough time that they've been going through. And I know recently it feels like TKL Stadium has filled up much more than what we've seen last season, because near the end of last season, there were definitely a lot of empty seats at TKL Stadium, but then as this season goes along and with them making a playoff push, that stadium has definitely filled up more than we've seen in the past. Now, we move on to the Portland Timbers. 25,128 was their average. The current average in 2022, 23,493 with a minus 1,635 as the attendance. Again, the Timbers, again, high ticket prices is definitely an issue of why maybe it keeps people away, especially with the inflation. But also, not to mention, the Timbers were not as good as what we saw. Well, actually, they're almost on par in terms of what we saw in 2019, because they kind of just sneaked into the playoffs, and that it feels like it's kind of the same thing. But again, inflation, and also so people just don't want to maybe be in a large crowd yet. Maybe brings that attendance down a little bit, but it's still a solid number. 23,493, still pretty solid. And for most games I've seen on TV at Providence Park, most of the seats are pretty much filled like what we saw in 2019. Now, for TFC, they have an average attendance of 25,048 in 2019. In 2022, it slightly went down to 24,755 with a minus 293 as the difference, but their attendance has started to go up. Like they're started to average about 30,000 every single game ever since the Insigne and Benedeschi signing, and they have now started to get that hype of look like the TFC of old. And heck, if those two players would have been in this team in the beginning of the season, they probably would have had a higher average than they are. But yeah, their number has started to gone up because of the interest. A lot of people are interested in the fact that they want to see two of the most dynamic players in the league, and two of the most expensive player in the league that has really great impact for this TFC team, and it's no wonder why their attendance have gone up. And I think by the end of the season, they probably will have a higher attendance compared to what they have in 2019, because 2019 was not a good year for a TFC. That was really the year when they pretty much ended the peak where they were. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Think of 2018. 2019 was a good year for TFC because they went to MLS Cup. So just ignore what I just said about how they had a bad season. But then we got the LA Galaxy, 23,205 was their attendance in 2019 and 2022, 22,912. And surprisingly, the difference is actually the same as TFC. Like, I couldn't believe that was the case, that they have 293 less fans attend their games, and that is 293 pay attendance less than last year. Because when you look at a lot of Galaxy games, there's been a lot of empty seats, and I of course went to one of them when they play Minnesota United. And yes, I know it was a midweek game, but there were a ton of empty seats where I think they announced the attendance like something about 20 plus thousand. There was no way there was 20 plus thousand. There maybe at best, I would say, like maybe 10 or 15,000 in the stadium. But again, I'll give them a pass because it's a midweek game, and midweek games are hard in terms of attendance. And also, not to mention, LAFC is also playing at that same night too. Then we got Orlando City, 22,761, but in 2022, 17,206. And I think Orlando City is pretty much one of those teams that I'll talk about that are the numerous teams that you have definitely see a big attendance drop, and that you can see a big difference in some of the games at Exploria Stadium in 2019 compared to 2022, when I feel like the reason why maybe the attendance has dropped, there's actually a lot of factors. I mean, the Florida heat is definitely the big factor, but I think maybe it's getting to a point where Orlando City fans are kind of fed up in terms of watching a team that's been very mediocre and kind of inconsistent, and that, of course, I kind of noticed that with just a lot of empty seats that is happening at Exploria Stadium. Like, this season is probably the most emptiest I've seen Exploria Stadium compared to when the stadium first opened. But yeah, they have now dropped their attendance to just 5,555 as the difference. Well, the biggest amount, and actually the second biggest compared to the Seattle Sounders. Then we got LAFC. Their attendance is 22,251. The attendance this season, 21,965, with a 286 difference. Though LAFC have pretty much said that they have sold out pretty much every single game. And again, this is also where we get to the fact that that sellout is probably because of pay attendance. It's not actually attendance in terms of fans in the stadium, because there has been some empty seats when you see some of these LAFC games. But at least I will say that for the most part, when I compare to this season to the one in 2019, it's kind of the same thing, because in 2019 there were also some empty seats in that stadium too. And again, when you compare it to this season compared to where they were in 2019, it's almost the same, with the way that they're kind of having the identical season of them being the best team in the league and are on point of winning their second Supporters' Shield in their franchise history. Then we get to NYCFC, where their attendance was 21,107 compared to this year, only 17,365, with a minus 3,742 difference. Now, I also want to put an asterisk in terms of NYCFC attendance number, because in 2019, I think they pretty much play every single game at Yankee Stadium as their home game, where this year, oh man, they've been kind of like the homeless team this year. I mean, there's a lot of memes talk about NYCFC and the memes about Yankee Stadium, but man, this season they've been moving to so many different stadium for their home games, and that has definitely take a hit in terms of attendance number, especially when games at Red Bull Arena, where I know they just had a game at Red Bull Arena not long long ago, and the attendance number were brutal at that. Like that, I think there were maybe like 4,000 fans that actually showed up, and I would also say that their attendance number maybe actually is a little bit better this season compared to last year, because last year they actually played more games at Red Bull Arena, and that those games there were like only like 4,000 or 5,000 fans or so showed up, and it's not a big surprise because why would any NYCFC fans want to make the trip to New Jersey and of course playing in their hated rival stadium? Like that is the definition of just embarrassment. The fact that you basically cannot you're basically getting kicked out by your main tenure only to play at a rival stadium. And it also is another example of why this team desperately need a stadium. Then we go to Minnesota United with a 19,723 as their attendance in 2019. The attendance in 2022, 19,474, with a minus 249 as a difference, and it's pretty much the same thing I would say with the Loons as LAFC. The attendance pretty much hasn't been changed. In fact, the Loons have been announcing that pretty much every single game has been a sold out. I think there's only one game that they didn't sold out, and that was the game that they play against Nashville SC. But that was also the game when they had that weather delay, and I can understand why maybe some Loons fans didn't want to go to that one because of the weather, bad weather. But pretty much all the games has been a sellout. Though I will say that I have definitely noticed more empty seats at Allianz Field compared to what we saw in 2019. And keep in mind, 2019 was also the first season when Allianz Field was open, and that was the season when pretty much there was no empty seats, even in midweek games. I think there has been more empty seats now because of the fact that the hype level maybe is starting to die down compared to the first season. Like whenever you open a new stadium, the hype level is definitely at an all-time high. But of course now it's started to die down a little bit. Though that being said, even though I have said there's been a little bit more empty seats, maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh because for the most part, when I watch the Loons play on Allianz Field, it's pretty much filled up every single game, and it of course helps the fact that this team has one of the best fan base in the league and one of the most loyal fan base in the league, and also the team have been pretty much doing as well as they did, and probably the best ever this season compared to what they were in 2019. Now we go to the Vancouver Whitecaps. 19,514 fans that attended in 2019 as their average, but this season only 15,903, and that's a minus 3,611 difference. And this is another team that you have also noticed that there's been a huge drop of attendance, and it makes sense because I'm pretty sure Whitecaps fans are kind of fed up of seeing their team lose every single week. And not to mention, I've also heard the tickets prices keep going up for Whitecaps games, even though the team hasn't really made a lot of progress. And add to the fact that there's been so many scandals involving this ownership and in this front office, you get bad attendance, as we've seen with a lot of Whitecaps games. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of games at BC Place. There's been tons of empty seats, and that the only way that I think Whitecaps can maybe get that stadium filled up as much as what we've seen in previous year is that they can of course start winning and be a regular playoff contender, because they made it to the playoffs last year, and you would think maybe that will bring some of the fans back, and then you realize that this is also a team that once again is still struggling and are below the red line. Speaking of a team that have struggling and that has been pretty much struggling for a while, that's the case for the San Jose Earthquakes. But this season is really the season where we finally saw that there's a huge attendance drop, and in 2019 we kind of start seeing it with 18,781 fans, and that I think up to that year that was actually the first season where PayPal Park wasn't sold out every single game, even though technically that was a lie because I've been to a lot of Quakes game in 2018 and 2019, and I was a season ticket holder, and in 2018, especially when the team was doing really bad, nobody showed up at the stadium, and they were still announcing 18,000, even though of course that's just clearly a pay attendance. But that number has shot up to 13,318. And keep in mind, pay attendance, that one of the things that I also want to mention is that the pay attendance include pretty much like the season ticket number. So basically, the amount of season ticket that you of course have in a team, that automatically, all those number automatically are included in the attendance, which is why when you see some teams that maybe have a lot of empty seats but they still have a good average attendance, well, that's because those numbers are included in terms of season ticket, and also just and then include the other non-season ticket, and people are buying it on SeatGeeks, Ticketmaster, or any other tickets platforms. So yeah, that was kind of the reason why the Quakes for a bit they did sold out their season tickets kind of thing for the first couple of years when PayPal Park was open. But yeah, this season and like last season, they definitely have not sold out. Haven't even came close in terms of it, and the attendance are basically showing at only 13,380, the lowest attendance if you don't include Inter Miami compared to 2019, and having minus 5,401 differential. And also, not to mention, this is also a team that the fan base are clearly pissed off about their owner and also their front office. So it's another reason why maybe that's why the attendance is not that good. And also, tickets prices to go to Quakes game has been much more expensive than what we saw a couple of years ago. And this is when this team is basically decreasing in terms of their quality year in and year out. Then we go to Sporting KC, who has an 18,601 average attendance, and this season it's been largely unchanged. Though I will say is that just like in 2019, where I believe that was the year when they missed the playoffs for the first time in 11 years, there's been a lot of empty seats at Children's Mercy Park, and this is also another example of that number is really heavily boosted because of season ticket holder and also the pay attendance, because there's times where there's no way they've been averaging like 18,000, and that at most I would say maybe 15,000 actually showed up in the stadium to watch this team. But I will also give credit to Sporting KC fans. Even during the tough time, there's been a lot more there's been a lot of fans, and that there has been some empty seats, but not as much as what we've seen with some teams that maybe just suck so badly, and then it's pretty noticeable for all the empty seats that you see around the stadium. Then we go to Real Salt Lake, who they were averaging 18,121, but in 2022 they're one of the rare teams that actually gone up in terms of the attendance, 20,430. In fact, RSL have basically said that they've been sold out every single game this season at home, and I would have believed that, because I think you have definitely seen less empty seats at RSL, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the team, of course, is winning again, and not to mention the one of their old owner, who turns out to be a very bad owner and also kind of create a scandal that's been kicked out by the league. Fans are starting to show up to RSL games again, and that 2,309, I believe that's the biggest increase. Or actually no, that's not one of the biggest increases. There's another team I'll talk about that has a huge increase in terms of people showing up to games. But yeah, pretty much every games you see on TV, Rio Tinto Stadium. I mean, there's games that there's still some empty seats, but for most part, it's definitely much more filled than what we've seen in the past couple of years, and especially in 2019 when they were not doing very well. Then we go to DC United. 17,744 was their 2019 average attendance, but this year only 16,160 with a minus 1,584 difference, and I don't think that is actually the true attendance. I mean, yeah, again, when you look at DC game this season, there is definitely a lot of empty seats at Audi Field, and it also doesn't help the fact that this is literally the worst team in the league, and that DC fans are probably fed up with their front office of years and years of mediocrity that is going on with this team. Then we go to the New York Red Bulls, who in 2019 they were averaging 17,281. In 2022, 16,102 with a minus 1,179 difference. I mean, Red Bulls game, the attendance have just gone down year and year out, and it's not because the team is bad or anything, but when you have higher tickets prices, and also not to mention it's really hard to actually get to the stadium in the first place. It's no wonder why attendance, of course, have started to drop. And also maybe some Red Bulls fans are kind of frustrated the fact that the teams are just kind of being stuck in mediocrity, where they're good enough to make it to the playoffs, but they're not good enough to compete. And when you're stuck in that kind of mediocrity for so long, it can be frustrating, because you want to see your team to finally eventually win MLS Cup, but you aren't able to do it because you just don't have a good enough team to do so. Then we go to the Philadelphia Union, who were averaging 17,111 fans back in 2019, but in 2022 it has actually now increased to 17,971 with a plus 860 difference. And again, in 2019, this was back when the Union started to become good, and they finished third this year, and then currently they're at the top of the standings. And they're also one team that I actually do believe that acceptance is actually correct. And maybe I would say that it might be a little bit lower than I expected, because I feel like there's been some Union games that it's been packed to the Raptors. There's basically no empty seats that I found at that stadium, and that, again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the team is winning. And Philadelphia is a city that, when you have a team that, of course, winning, people will pay attention, and it's not surprised that, of course, it is the case right now. And the attendance, of course, have been very good compared to even going back to some of the bad years. That I think this team was averaging like only 15,000 or 14,000 fans. Well, a lot due to the fact that that team wasn't winning, and that, again, Philly likes winners. If you win, we show up. If you don't win, we're not gonna bother showing up games. That's kind of the same case with New England too. In 2019, when they were still in that mediocrity range. They were averaging 16,737 fans, but this year 19,893, and they're actually one of the biggest difference, but probably the biggest difference in terms of a team that haven't moved to a new stadium, with a 3,106 difference. And again, winnings, of course, can help draw fans, and the Revs have definitely done a lot of winnings, especially last year, and the hype level has definitely been there, even though I know it still sucks that a lot of Revs fans has to make that difficult trip to go to Gillette Stadium from the Boston area. Attendance has helped because of the fact that the team, of course, are winning, and there's times where they're averaging like 20,000 plus. So because of the fact that this team is a very entertaining team to watch. In fact, I think you could maybe even say that the attendance maybe dropped down a little bit compared to last year, because last year there were games where that stadium is in the lower bowl was pretty much packed every single game, because they were pretty much winning every game, and that they were on their own way of getting the best regular season in MLS history. Then we go to CF Montreal, or Montreal Impact as they were known in 2019. 16,171 fans in their attendance this year, only 15,551, but it has gotten better. I have seen some more Montreal game at Stade Saputo that the stands have been filled up. In fact, the last game, I think, when they play in the last one, that was probably the most filled I've seen Stade Saputo, where there was really no empty seats whatsoever, and I think that was a sellout, and that, of course, have brought the number up a little bit, because, again, with Montreal, as much as they are, of course winning, and you would think that of course would bring the fans back, and in some way it kind of has now. It's the team name, and also the logo, and also the ownership, which is where fans are still not happy about, and that there's some of them are just they don't want to show up because of that reason, no matter even if the teams are having the best regular season that they probably have since they came into the league. Then we get to the Houston Dynamo, 15,674. That was their 2019 average attendance. This year, 16,246 with an increase of 572. And yeah, Dynamo attendance have definitely increased a little bit. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you get Hector Herrera in this team, yeah, there's going to be more butts in the seats. I mean, there's still obviously notable empty seats at Dynamo game. I mean, they're one of those teams that a lot of people have made memes about how they always have like tens of thousands of empty seats in the stadium, but it has gone better. And I think that number also has boosted the fact that they had that one game against FC Dallas in the Texas Derby, and that was probably the first time I've seen that stadium filled up in a very, very long time. Now, moving on into the next team, we got the Columbus Crew. They were only averaging 14,856 fans, but keep in mind this was also the year after when, of course, the Save the Crew campaign was happening, and that they finally decided to build themselves a new stadium and moved away from historic Crew Stadium, and it has definitely paid a huge dividends, because they're averaging 19,202 fans with a plus 4,346 difference, which is the highest increase average compared to 2019 than it is in 2022. And again, it's not a big surprise, because when they of course play at Lower.com Field, a world-class soccer-specific stadium, and also play near the downtown Columbus area, more people, of course, showed up compared to when they play at historic Crew Stadium. And even though I know that stadium has a lot of history, being the first soccer-specific stadium, it was very outdated, and that they desperately needed a new stadium. And that once they, of course, got that new stadium, and also knowing the fact that the Crew, for the most part, have started to winning more compared to during their days at historic Crew Stadium, the attendance have definitely increased compared to where they were in 2019. Now, looking at FC Dallas, 14,842 fans showed up as the average attendance in 2019, and they're another team that also have an increase this season, 16,157 fans, and have a difference of 1,315 fans show up more in terms of the average attendance compared to 2019. And again, part of that has to do with the fact that Dallas have been a team that's been winning, and again, anytime when you're a team that is winning, you're going to draw fans. But also, not to mention, I think this year there's been more Dallas games that has been playing at nighttime compared to what we saw in 2019, and I think that is the correct decision with the fact that nobody wants to go to Toyota Park and watch a Dallas game during the hot Texas summer, and that with a lot of these games that has now been pushed back to 8 o'clock and has been pushed back to more of a night game and much more cooler. It's no wonder why there's been more fans have been showing up at stadium, and that there isn't as much empty seats as we've seen in the past at Dallas game. But again, a lot of that has to do with the fact that this team is winning, and that when you of course are winning, and not to mention you push games more to the nighttime, which is a more suitable time for Dallas fans to watch their team. That's why the attendance of course have increased. Then we go to the Colorado Rapids, 14,284 fans, and compared to this season, 14,492 fans, only a 208 fans average attendance increase. But I think it's pretty much been the same story for the Rapids. Like, it feels like they're one of those teams that no matter if they're good or not, and they were good last season, but they were still struggling in terms of getting fans' interest, because the Rapids, they're one of the worst teams in terms of marketing the team, and not to mention playing in a stadium that is nowhere close to Denver, and I've been to that stadium once, and I can tell you how hard it is to actually get there, even with public transportation. I think I took an Uber there and then eventually took a bus, but even then, I can see why the location, of course, is a huge issue. And again, not to mention, marketing is not very good. Like, you don't see a lot of people in Denver wearing Rapids t-shirting. I even had a chance to talk to one of a Rapids fan doing that my only visit there when the Quakes play against the Rapids, and he says that nobody really care about the team, because nobody, some people don't even know that they actually have a soccer team too, and that is a really telling story of the fact that the team is not doing well in terms of marketing to the Denver area, and also it doesn't help the fact that they play basically in the middle of nowhere. Then we go to the Chicago Fire, and speaking of a team that play in the middle of nowhere, now 2019 was the last season that they, of course, play at SeatGeek Stadium full time. And keep in mind, I want to use the word full time because they technically still do play in that stadium occasionally. And an example of that was just this weekend. They did play at SeatGeek Stadium for not for the first time. They did play a little bit in 2021 too, and I heard that they actually are going to be playing more games at SeatGeek Stadium this year too, because they have that conflict with the Chicago Bears and sharing Soldier Field. And the attendance ever since they move out to Soldier Field, it hasn't. I mean, it has increased to now 15,738 compared to just 12,324, which was the worst attendance in the league. But it's still not good. Like, when you see Fire games, there's been times at Soldier Field where it's pretty clear that games there feels like a cabin in the stadium, and it's just way too big for them. And I'm not saying that the move back to Soldier Field was bad or anything. I think they had to do it because of the fact that nobody was going to go to Bridgeville to see the Fire play, especially there's no good public transportation to actually get to there, and that I think it was good that they of course move back to Soldier Field, but also not to mention when the teams aren't winning and they try their best in terms of marketing a team, but they haven't really been very successful with it. And of course, it doesn't help when you release an ugly logo like they did when they decided to make their move back to Soldier Field. Yeah, that's why the attendance hasn't been as good as it is. And that, again, for the Fire, it's an interesting case because do they want to maybe build another soccer-specific stadium? Because I'm pretty sure they're not going to go back to SeatGeek Stadium as their permanent home, and that they're one of those teams that, just like NYCFC, I think they themselves quietly is a team where they've been having some stadium issue. The fact that games at Soldier Field isn't really attended very well. I mean, there's times where it has been attended well, but it's not as good as what they thought, of course, it is the case, and that I really think if this team can start winning, then I think their attendance, of course, would increase. But that being said, now let's look at the total average: 21,310 fans that we saw in terms of the average in 2019 compared to this year, 20,815 fans, and of course that average doesn't include the four teams that I've mentioned before that that I didn't mention them because they weren't in the league back in 2019, and that if you kind of include those 14, that's where the number is at 20,815. And you could even argue that though some of those teams have really helped that average attendance up, because if it wasn't for some of those expansion teams like Charlotte, who's like they're averaging like about 30,000 every single game, Austin FC pretty much averaging like 20,000 so fans at Q2 Stadium, and even Nashville SC averaging about 25,000 so fans at their brand new dig in Geodis Park. Yeah, the league attendance would have been a lot less than that. But again, just to kind of sums up in terms of it, and maybe I'll do another video talk about why MLS attendance have dropped down compared to what we see at its peak a couple years ago. When I think a couple years ago there was at a peak where we were averaging like 21,900 and even close to the 22K mark, is mainly due to the fact that inflation has been at an all-time high. Fans are still a little bit reluctant to go back to attend large event because we're still in a pandemic, and also not to mention tickets prices is much higher than what we seen in previous year, and that yeah, it's getting to a point where we always heard about soccer tickets, especially in Europe, where a lot of fans have been very frustrated because of that and have even openly protest and demand their club to frozen the tickets prices because of how high it is. And I feel like maybe in MLS, it hasn't had that movement just yet because people are happy with the way that even some of these tickets has been really expensive and are just almost at a level where we see some of these European leagues where some of these games there in Europe is even more cheaper to attend an MLS game. That could be maybe something that could be a huge factor of why the attendance, of course, have started to went down. But like I said, I'll maybe go more in depth in terms of that if I do make another follow-up video talk about why the attendance have started to drop in MLS compared to pre-pandemic year. But if you enjoyed this video, if you make sure you leave a like, smash the subscribe button, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.